Okay, I'm sharing my screen. Please confirm if you see the screen. No? My screen visible? Okay then. So yesterday we were discussing about the uh, constructors in Java, right? So now we know what is a constructor, right? So a constructor is just a block of code which is similar to Java methods, and it does not have any return value. Usually, so when you come across the word constructor, always remember that it is typically used to initialize the values to the instance variable. This is the actual idea. And again, to define any constructor, we need to follow some rules and regulations. So we have discussed about those rules and regulations yesterday, right? And also we have understood about some control flow, how the constructor can be called. Okay, whenever the object is created, the constructor will be called automatically. Right? When you create an object, the constructor will be called automatically. At the time of calling the constructor, the memory gets allocated. So today we will jump into more details. Okay, I just want you to understand the internal things about the constructor, so that you will become much comfortable when you come across the word constructor, right? So let us try to understand about the nature of the default constructor in Java. So what is the default constructor? So very simple. Whenever the programmer has forgotten to place any constructor inside the Java class, the compiler will do what? The compiler will place a constructor. The compiler will just place a constructor, right? Along with the super keyword. Super call keyword. Today we will understand about what is the super keyword. The second thing is, and the access modifier of the constructor is going to be same as the access modifier of the class. Okay, the second thing is the default constructor. The default constructor is always a non-parameterized constructor. Okay, now you might be wondering what does it we have come across a new word which is called the super keyword. So why we have to deal with the super keyword? We will understand that today. So let me take small code. Let us say that I have a Java class. I have a class. Okay. The moment I give this code to the compiler, right? So we know these things, right? Don't think that we know everything. So we are going to discuss some things which we don't know today, right? So the moment you give this code to the compiler will come into the picture, right? What the compiler will be doing? Compiler will check the syntactical errors, and again it will do the basic things. Okay, it will consider the class as the default class, and the class does not have any. This class is not extending from any other class, right? It is going to use the object class as the super class or the parent class. Second thing. The third thing is it is going to add a default constructor. Always remember the default constructor will be added by the compiler. Since the class A, we haven't defined any, the programmer has not defined any constructor in the class A. So default constructor will be added by the compiler along with this default constructor, right? And if you look at the access modifier of the class, the same access modifier will be applicable for the constructor also. And also it is going to add one more thing which is called as what? The super keyword. These things will be added by the compiler. I will tell you what is the super keyword. So remember one thing, okay? So whenever the compiler is adding the constructor, okay, it will add the default constructor. So default constructor is nothing but the constructor that is added by the compiler. This is the default constructor, right? The constructor that is added by the compiler, okay? At the time of adding the constructor, it will also ensure that the super keyword is added. First, this is the case one. This is the case one. So your class is going to get converted like this, right? For example, if I have another class, let me say that I have a class like class car class. Okay? Class car. Okay? If I give this piece of code to the compiler, the same thing compiler is going to do. Okay, compiler will do what? Compiler will perform the compilation, right? And at the time of performing the compilation, it will ensure that the default keyword is added for the class, right? And the car class is going to extend to the object class, right? And also, a default constructor will be added by the compiler. The name of the constructor is going to be same as the class name and a block, right? And this default, this default constructor will be access modifier is going to be same as the class access modifier, right? Default. The class is public, the access modifier is going to be public, but here the class is default, so the constructor, the default constructor would also get the same access modifier. And again, one more thing, it is going to add the super keyword. I'll tell you what is the super keyword. For now, whatever the class that you get, the compiler will ensure that it's going to add all these things. Okay, all these things will be added by the compiler. Now let us understand the importance of the super keyword, right? Even though, for example, let me take a small piece of code. Okay. I have a class here, right? And let me say something like system dot out dot println. I just want to display something like the main method. If I give this code to the let me start compiling this code file, save as. Let me do a.java. A.java. It has been saved successfully. Let me open the command prompt. Let me change the directory cd space java to java c space a.java. So I have just compiled the code. I have just compiled the code. So we are not seeing anything here. No compilation errors. So at the time of compilation, what are the things that is going to happen behind this? It's now focus here. Okay, this control flow is really important. Okay, so this is the code, programmer's code. I can say that. I can simply say that this is the programmer's code or the developer's code, right? The programmer want to compile this code. Okay, the compiler will come to the picture, right? Focus here. Compiler is going to add, add some, do some manipulations. Okay, so we know this manipulations. The default, the class will be treated as default class. Right, and the class A is going to extend to the object class. Now focus here, and the constructor is missing. Okay, the developer has not defined any constructor. Okay, the compiler is going to place a constructor which is going to be same as the class name. Okay, let me bring this down. Okay, which is going to be same as the class name A, right? Okay, and the access modifier is going to be same as the access modifier of the class. So default access modifier default. And also it is going to add a keyword like the super keyword. Now if you see, the moment I start executing this code, okay, I mean the moment I start compiling this code, you don't see anything because there are no errors. But let us say that I am creating an object. Let me remove this. Okay. Let us say that I am just creating an object for the class. I am saying a obj equal to new a. Now focus here. Your attention is required. So what happens usually? At the time of, the moment this code starts getting executed, the main thread is going to execute all the instructions inside the main method. So we have only one instruction, right? So for the new keyword, an object will be created. So we know these things, right? And the A constructor is going to be called. A constructor is going to be called. Or not? A constructor is going to be called. So this A constructor is defined by the compiler. Okay, the control goes here, right? Focus here. It is going to execute the block of the constructor, block of the default constructor, right? And it encounters the super keyword. Let me repeat. It is going to encounter this weird super keyword. What does it really mean? It says, right? Super means the parent class. If I want to draw the low level diagram for this class hierarchy, I have class A. Right, and this my class A is extending to the object class, which is the parent class, right? It is the super class of all the classes. Okay, It is a super class of all the classes. The compiler has ensured that my class is getting extended to the object class, right? So inside the object class, okay, just inside the object class is somewhere defined in the Java library. Object class is somewhere defined inside the Java library. Inside the object class, there is a constructor called the object constructor. Don't get any confused. Okay, so my class is getting extended to object class, right? So again, there is an object class. Inside this object class, we have 11 methods. So we have discussed two methods. One is the hash code method. The second method is a toString method, right? Apart from that, there are 9 more methods. So totally, there are 11 methods, right? And along with the 11 method, there is a constructor called the object class constructor, which is same as the class. Okay? So the control will jump. Okay, you're using the super keyword, right? Super means just replace the super keyword with the parent class name. Super means it is same as object. Super will be replaced with the same as super is nothing but the super class constructor. Means here for the class A, the super class is object class. Or I can say that for the class A, the parent class is object class. I can say that for the class A, the base class is object class. Right? Super means replace the super with the respective parent class, which is what? The object class. Indirectly, it is calling the object class constructor. The control will just go to the object class constructor, okay, and it is just a blank, okay. It's a blank. No statements will be there to get executed, but there is a constructor object class constructor. The control will go there and it is going to come back here. We will understand some examples, okay. For now, according to the main thread, the control will simply go to the object class, okay, and it will hit this object class constructor and it's going to come back because of the super keyword. The super keyword is given by the compiler. Okay, let me help you with another example. For example, let me say if I have two classes, okay. Let me say if I have class B, okay. I have class A. I have two classes, guys. When I say my class A is getting extended to class B, class A is getting extended to class B, right? So I am declaring my own constructor, the class B constructor, and I am declaring my own constructor, the class A constructor, right? So I have my two constructors defined. These constructors are defined by myself, A constructor and the B constructor, okay. My class A is getting extended to B, right? If I give this piece of code to the compiler, okay, the compiler will do some common checks, okay. The common checks, when I say the common checks, it will ensure that the class E is getting the default access modifier. The class is getting the default access modifier. First thing, so the class B is going to get the default access modifier. Okay. And also the B constructor is defined by the programmer, okay. Programmer has defined this, but the compiler is not going to do what? The compiler is not going to add any constructor, okay. This is not a default constructor now. This constructor has been defined by the programmer. Developer has written this constructor, right? So the compiler will not add any more constructor because developer has already defined a constructor. Compiler will not add any more constructor, okay. So developer has defined this constructor in such a way that he ensured that the access modifier of this constructor is default itself, okay. It is going to add default one since there is no specification, right? But the compiler the programmer did not place any keyword, okay. The compiler will definitely place a keyword like super keyword. For now, try to understand, the compiler is going to place a super keyword for each and every constructor. This is a compiler job. The super keyword will be placed in the first line of the constructor. Compiler will simply place that. For now, just assume that compiler will simply place it. Likewise, here also same thing will happen. Okay, default. Okay, and this is also going to be what? Default, right? And a super keyword will be placed by the compiler. Right? The moment I try to create an object for the class A, when I say a obj equal to new a obj equal to new a, right? So for the new keyword, an object will be created. Okay, and there is a constructor call, a constructor call. Okay, the control will be calling the a class constructor. Inside this a class constructor there is a super keyword, right? Super means just try to assume, okay, super means just replace the super with the parent class of the class A. So A is extending to B. Means super means just replace the super with the parent class of current class, okay, which is what B. Indirectly, okay, there is a call to the parent class constructor. The control will be transferred to the parent class constructor. Okay, again there is a super keyword. Super means now replace this with the parent class of B. So it has no parent class. So every class by default is going to extend to the object class. Extends to the object class. Replace the super with the object here. Okay, the call goes to the object class constructor, right? Inside that there is object class constructor. There are no statements in the constructor block. For now, the control is just going there, and simply it is coming back. So we need to understand, first of all, we will understand the control is going there only when we add some statements inside the constructor. Okay, let us understand this by making a small changes in my code. Let us say I have a class B, I have a B class, I have a class, okay, and I want to define my own constructor. Let me say B. I'm defining my own constructor. Okay, let me say I am adding system dot out dot println. Okay, I am saying B one. So when this statement is getting executed, I can assure that my B constructor is called. Okay, and I am taking another constructor like A constructor. I am saying A. Okay, now you see the magic here. I am extending my class A from B. I am using A extends B. I am using A extends B. Okay. If I create an object for the class, I mean class A for bj equal to new A. Now you see the output. By looking at the output, you will get some idea. You are getting B con A con. So you are not even calling the B constructor. The object has been created for the A class, but why the B constructor is getting executed? Why this is happening? Object is, so if you are creating an object for the B class, then definitely, okay, you can say that the B constructor can get executed. The object is just created for the class A. A constructor call is happening here. Why the output is like B con A? Let us do this testing. You will understand the perfect picture. Let me close all this nonsense. Okay, not required. Now let us understand the tracing part. Okay, just try to assume. Okay, now this is the developer's code, right? So I want to compile this. Okay, let us see what kind of modification will be done by the compiler, right? The compiler will check the class. The name of the class is B. The class has a missing access modifier, right? So default access modifier will be used, and class B is not extending to any class. Okay, the compiler will add what? Extends object. Compiler will ensure that the class B is not extending to another class. Let me extend the class B to the object class, right? And it has found the constructor placed by the programmer. So it is not going to place any default. Already constructor has been defined by the programmer, but it will do one thing. It will see, okay, the programmer has missed the super keyword. It will ensure that the super keyword is placed in the first line. This will be done by the compiler. Why it is doing all this, we'll understand that later. For now, super keyword will also be placed by the compiler. Okay. Like let us see the class A. Class A is already extended into class B. No issues. No issues. So it will not going to extend this to object class because class A is a parent. Fine. But it is going to add the default keyword. Default keyword, right? And it has found the A constructor which is defined by the programmer. but programmer has missed the super keyword, it is going to add the super keyword. Right? And also, the access modifier is missing in the class B, so it will be treated as a default constructor. This will also be treated as the default constructor. So these changes are definitely, these changes are being done by what? Being done by the compiler. Right? So let us try to understand the execution. Right? For the execution, what happens? The main thread get access to the main method. The main thread will be created. The main thread get access to the main method. 1 minute, guys. Okay. You are calling what? You are creating an object for the class A, right? So before even creating an object, just let us understand the hierarchy. You have two classes. This is class A and this is class B, right? So this class A is extending to class B. Class A is extending to class B, right? So A is the child class and B is the parent class. B is the parent class. Isn't it? Or else I can say that with respect to class A, B is super class. With respect to class A, B is the base class. With respect to class A, I can use this one. Now, if you see, the object is created for the class A obj equal to new A. For the new keyword, an object will be created in the if area, right? And there is a constructor call, a constructor call. The control will be transferred to call the A constructor. Okay, A constructor is inside the class A. This is the A constructor, isn't it? Right? And the control will be transmitted to execute the block of A constructor. Okay, the first instruction is the super keyword. Super means just replace the super keyword with the super class of A. What is a super class of A? B is a super class, right? Just replace it like B. This is indirectly nothing but the B super class constructor or B constructor. Okay, from here the control will be transmitted to B class constructor. Okay, from here the call is getting transmitted. From here the call is getting transmitted to do what? To do the B constructor call. Okay. And again there is super keyword, right? From here the call will be, so for the B, with respect to B class, object class is a super class of B class, right? So indirectly it is calling the object class constructor. Object class constructor. Okay, in the object, just imagine that there is an object class. It is a mother of all the class, or it is a super class of all the classes, or it is a root class of all the classes in the Java predefined library. Inside the object class, there are 11 methods and one constructor, which is called what? The object class constructor. So the control will be transmitted to call the object class constructor from it. Okay. So what is happening? From A constructor, the call is for A constructor. Inside this A constructor, super keyword means what? B constructor, parent constructor. The call is transferred to B constructor, and again inside this again super call. The call is for the object constructor, and this block gets executed. So output is going to be empty because nothing will be there in the object class constructor. And the control is going to come back to display the next line, which is what? Bcon. Which is what? Bcon. So bcon will be displayed to the console. Bcon will be displayed on the console. Right? And then from the control will be transmitted back from the place where it was called previously. One minute, guys, there is a paint issue. Okay, from here the control will be transferred back to the place where it was previously closed, and then acon constructor, the one instruction which is acon that is left, that needs to get executed. So the output is going to be what? Bcon there. Okay, that's the reason we are getting output as what? Bcon icon. We will see one more example for the better understanding. Now just try to understand. Okay, so just create an object for B equal to new B. Now object is created for the B class constructor. Now can you guess what will be the output? Any idea?
Beacon inference, sir.
Only beacon, because indirectly beacon is going to extend to the object class, right? Extends to the object class, right? So B constructor call will be there for B constructor, and the compiler is going to place the super keyword. The super class call is for object class call. That nothing will be there in the object class constructor. The control will come back here, and the remaining statement will be executed, and the control will be transmitted back to the same place, and the main thread will be destroyed. Right? So what happens if I just do something like this? If I'm not extending my class A to any other class, right? And if I'm just calling the A class, I'm just creating an object for the A class. What would be the output now?
Beacon inference, sir.
Only Acon constructor. Okay. Now let us try to increase the complexity. I'm saying my class A is extending to class B. So my class B is extending to class C, and I'm taking the class C as well here. Okay. Now if I take class C here, okay, let me add my class C constructor. I'm using here CCon, right? Now if I just execute this piece of code, okay. Now answer me what would be the possible output. Let me increase this. What would be the possible output? I am just creating an object for the class A. Right?
Beacon, Beacon inference, sir.
Correct, exactly. Now we hope you understand. Let me trace this one thing, okay? I'll trace one thing, this one code for others. Let me trace this. Okay, usually what happens when you give this piece of code, if you have pen and paper, just try to trace the things like this. When you give this piece of code to the compiler, okay, default keyword will be added for all the classes. Okay, when you're not specifying any access modifier, just add the default keyword. Okay, and if any class is not extending to any other class, okay, the compiler is going to extend that particular class to the object class, right? And there is a constructor. Constructor has already been defined by the programmer, but the programmer has not stated the access modifier, so the default access modifier will be used here. And again, the first line of any constructor will be what? Super. The super keyword, super class call will be added by the compiler. Likewise, every class is going to get the default access modifier. Here, the class B is extending to class C, right? So compiler will not interfere here. Compiler will not interfere here. And for the B constructor, default keyword will be added. Inside this B constructor, it will check for the super keyword. Super keyword is missing. The compiler will add the super keyword. Same thing will be applicable for the class A, default, okay, and for the constructor it is default again, right? And for the the first keyword or super keyword, right? What you are doing, you are just the only one line is there inside the main method, right? So you are creating an object for the class A, right? So an object gets created. Okay, because of the new code, an object gets created, and you started calling the constructor, a constructor, right? The control will be transmitted to the a constructor. Okay, let us trace this constructor code. From here, the control is getting transmitted to the a constructor code, right? Okay. But inside this a constructor code, there is a super keyword. A super means just replace the super with the parent class of A. A as the B as B is the parent of A, right? So super means B class constructor will be called. From here, the call will be transmitted to B class constructor, right? Again, inside this B class constructor, there is a super keyword. So what is a super class of B? C is a super class, right? From here, the call will be transmitted to the C class constructor. Again, there is a call, there is super class call. Super class is what? Object class. From here, the call will be transmitted to what? To the object class constructor, which is there in the Java library. But the object class constructor has an empty block. Okay, nothing is there to get executed. Okay, so this object class will be executed Okay, but nothing is there to be displayed in the console. No memory level changes as well as no console level changes, right? After executing this, from here the control will be transmitted back to the place where it was transmitted before. So this line has to get executed. Okay, what is the output? CCON. Okay, and from here it has to get transmitted to the place where it was called previous. From here it has to get transmitted here, right? BCON. Okay, backtracking. We are just doing the backtracking, right? From BCON. Okay, from here, okay, it will be transmitted to the place where it was previously transmitted. It is going to be what? It is going to be the ACON. ACON. Right? So that's why the output, after doing this ACON, it will come back to the place. Okay, from here to here. There are no more instructions. The main thread will be destroyed. The main thread will go. Main thread will be destroyed. That's why the output is going to be CCON, BCON, ACON. Okay. If you don't believe me, let me execute this code. Java space a.java. Java space CCON, BCON, ACON. Are we good till now, everyone? Can I get confirmation from everyone? Are you able to follow my tracing? What about Dinesh, Revati, Manisha, Monica, Teja, Srikanth? Getting now? Don't take this for the granted. Okay, you understand this, you can understand the the next high level topics, right? So this is this concept is called as constructor chaining, but we are not discussing about constructor chaining actually. So we are just trying to understand about the super keyword. Right? And one more concept is there in the constructor. Okay, there is a concept like what? The overloaded constructor. Okay, let me give you some theory here. What is the super keyword in the Java constructors? The Java constructor. I can say that the super keyword is the super keyword call should be the first line of the Java constructor. Should be the first line. And if the programmer is missing to add the super keyword, the compiler will add this. Okay, what did I just say? This should be the first line of the Java constructor. Okay, let us do some violation. Okay, just want to violate it to understand whether my statement is correct or not. Let us do a kind of violation here. Let me say I am taking the super keyword in the second line. Now tell me if it is valid or invalid. According to my statement, do you think it is going to be valid or invalid? Okay, according to my statement, it is invalid because super keyword should always be the first line of the constructor. Okay, the first line of the constructor is something different. Right? Let me execute this code. It says call to the super must be the first statement in the constructor. Violation is there. The programmer is placing the super keyword. Okay, he should place it in the first line as the first line of the constructor. But here the first line of the constructor is something. You may be thinking, sir, compiler will be adding the super keyword in the first. No. The programmer will see if the programmer has added the super keyword or not. But the programmer has added, but not in the first line. The programmer is not adding it. Compiler will definitely ensure that this is getting added in the first line. You might be thinking, what if the line is this? There is no extra line here. No worries, compiler will create a new line and it will add the super keyword. If the programmer is not defining it, so programmer is not placing any super keyword, compiler will add the super keyword, the first line. But if the programmer is deliberately adding the super keyword, not in the first line, in some other line, okay, this is syntactically incorrect. Okay, that's why we are getting this error. Java C#A.java. Now is it making sense? Why my statement? Is it giving justification to my statement? Everyone? Yes, no? Hello? Hello?
Sure.
You will understand Balaji, Lakshmi, at least chat, that's, type in the chat box at least if you're not able to talk. Okay. The second thing is, okay, so we have understood about super, it should be the always the first line, right? Let us try to understand some other thing here. See guys, it is not like I can have only one constructor in my code. It's not like I can have only one constructor in my code. Okay, let me say, let me remove this. Okay, I can pass parameters to my constructor. Okay, when I say this, when how I can say this constructor? This is a constructor. This is a no parameterized constructor. Okay, I can also take a constructor like that is going to accept one parameter. I can say like something like integer a. Okay, I can say that a one param. This constructor is accepting a parameter. What is that parameter? At integer value. I can take a constructor which is accepting what? Which is accepting two parameter. I can say two param. Right? Now if you think, the moment I start calling the, I create an object for the A class constructor, right? It will check for the parameter. Okay, this is a constructor which has not any parameters. You are not passing any parameters. Okay, the equivalent constructor will be called. So this constructor will be called. For example, if I want to call this constructor, if I want to execute this constructor, I should create an object for that constructor in such a way that I am passing the equivalent parameters. It is accepting an integer value. I will be passing a random integer here so that the control will be transmitted to the respective constructor which is accepting the integer value. So in this case, this will get executed. Right? If I want to execute this constructor, I can create an object in such a way that the constructor is transmitting the two values 10, 10, which is of what? Integer type. So this time the equivalent constructor will be found and that constructor logic will be executed. Right? And if I just run this code, okay, Java C space a.java, Java space, you get a one param, two param. You would be thinking, okay, just these constructors are getting called. And again, your thinking should be like what? You should you should expand your thinking. When I say expand your thinking, always assume that the super keyword is not placed. Okay, the super keyword will be placed for every constructor. Super keyword will be placed for every constructor. Since the developer is missing to add the super keyword. Super keyword will be placed here. Super keyword will be placed for each and every constructor. Right? And again, not with the super keyword, the default access modifier will also be placed. Let me do that also really quick. Default. Okay, default. Okay, default. Here also default. And this class is going to get action to the object class. Extends object class. Right now, what you're doing what you're doing what you have created an object. You're calling a constructor, okay, which is accepting no parameters. Okay, so there is a constructor which is not accepting any parameters. That constructor will be called. The control will be transmitted to the constructor which is not accepting any parameters. And again, there is a super call will be there, but the control will just go to the object class and will come back. Nothing else. So this is happening, but you cannot realize that this thing is happening because there are no statements to get executed in the object class constructor. The control will definitely go to the object class constructor. Okay, there is an constructor called object class constructor in the object class object. Okay, inside this you have an object class constructor, right? The control will just go and come back here, but you don't even realize that the control is going there and coming back. And after coming back, acon will be executed. Control will come back. Next call is a constructor which is accepting a argument 100. 100 is an integer type. It will look for the matching constructor that is accepting the integer type. This is a matching constructor. Superclass call is there. Control will go to the object class and comes back, and it will execute the remaining statement, which is one param. Okay, and the next one is what? 10 comma 10. Both are integer type. It will check for the equivalent constructor which is accepting the two integer as a parameter. Superclass call, it is going to go there and come back. We don't realize that these things are happening behind the scenes, and two param constructor will be executed. That's why the output you find here is what? Acon, one param, and two param. This concept is called as what? Overloaded constructor. So the question is, what is an overloaded constructor? Overloaded. Whenever you call a constructor by passing different values, constructors are called as the overloaded constructors. Or else I can say that the constructors which has different parameters. The constructors with different parameters is called as overloaded constructors. You can place a class can have any number of overloaded constructors. Okay. Actually, the usage of overloaded constructors is like, okay, why one has to go for overloaded constructor? If you ask me that question, I can bring back the same analogy which I had explained earlier. Okay, in the extra class, I think there is a college like ABC college. This time, the ABC college, after completing your higher education, after completing your high school, right? And if you want to get admission in ABC college, this ABC college has three kind of forms. Okay, there is a form 1, there is a form 2, and there is a form 3. The first form is expecting a simple information from the student, name and the age. Okay, the second form is expecting what? The information like name, the information like the bank details, okay, the information like the location, right, and the information like the personal information like Aadhaar card. This is the form 2 expectations. The form 3 expectation is what? Name, okay, phone number, okay, and the Gmail mail address. So you visit an ABC college after completing your school, higher education, right? And you want to take admission in ABC college. Okay, so this ABC college has three forms: form 1, form 2, and form 3. Right? So when you are just visiting the college for the namesake, okay, you just want to get the information, get the course information, right? So they give you the form 1. Second, if you want to really get the admission, right, they will give you the form 2, so that you can fill in your bank details and like you can get the bank details and you can transfer the amount for the admission, right? And if your interest is to just do the comparison between one college to another college, right, for the future reference, right, you will be getting the form 3. If you see, each and every form is expecting a different kind of information. If you want to cache the information by the Java classes, right, you have a Java class which is, let us say that the class is student class. Okay, so you define a constructor. Okay, first constructor, the student constructor is going to accept It's going to initialize values only for the name information and the age information. Okay, if you want to catch values of the name information and age information, you have an overloaded constructor that is going to accept the name and the age, so that the values will be set to the instance variables, right? And second case, if you, for the same student class, if you want to collect the bank information details like the location, personal information like the bank details, and the location, right? You have an overloaded constructor which is going to accept the three values as per the form 2. The third thing is what? Name, phone number, the mail address. Okay, you have an overloaded constructor which is going to have, it's going to collect the information like the name and like the phone number, okay, and like the mail address. You have as per the form 3. Sometimes in your class there will be a lot of variables, but you want to assign values selectively. For example, you may be having a lot of properties here. Okay, you can have the age property here, you can have the number property, you can have the mail property, you can have the bank account property, you can have the location property, and also you can have the phone number property. You can have many properties, but you are going to initialize the values only for the selective properties, right? To initialize the values for selective properties, you go with the overloaded constructors, right? So this is the reason why we are discussing about the overloaded constructor. So when we develop, not the developing application, right? In the future, there's a concept called POJO class concept is there. Over there, we will understand about this usage. For now, just grasp the knowledge to understand how the control is getting transmitted from one constructor to another constructor. Just understand that there is an option to there is an option like the overloaded constructor which is going to set the value selectively to the properties. That is the reason why we are discussing this. Is it making sense or no? Can I get yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Just show some patience, okay? You will get these things very clearly in the future classes. I think two of them are escaped. Huh? 2, 3, 4, 5. Dinesh escaped, Teja escaped. Okay. Now next thing is, now let's try to understand some tricky questions I'm going to give. Okay? When I say class A, guys, when I say class A, okay, so this is the programmer's code. It's a programmer's code. The compiler will place a constructor, right? Place a constructor. The access modifier of this constructor is going to be same as the access modifier of the class, and also it is going to place a super keyword. Okay, this constructor is called as what? The default constructor. Default constructor. Default constructor. And again, when you say a constructor is a default constructor, always remember this constructor is placed by the compiler. When it is placed by the compiler, it's default constructor. The second thing is the default constructors are always non-parameterized. Okay, you don't pass any values. There is no option to pass any values. It is always non-parameterized. No parameterized constructor. Okay. Keep this aside. Now, if I say something like, let us say that the developer is writing a code like he has a class A, inside this class A, right? And he has also placed a constructor, okay? And he has also placed a super keyword. Okay, now if you give this code to the compiler will do some changes, but not with respect to the constructor, okay? The constructor is already defined by the developer, right? Now you cannot say this is a default constructor. Default constructor, even though it is looking similar to the default constructor, you cannot address this as a default constructor. This constructor is defined by the programmer. Now this constructor is called as what? No parameterized constructor. For understanding what is the difference between the no parameters and default constructor, default constructor is always placed by the compiler. When compiler is placing any constructor, okay, boom, that is the default constructor. Okay, when the compiler is not placing any constructor, this constructor, it may look like similar to default constructor, but this is defined by the programmer. Programmer has defined this. Even though it is no parameterized constructor, the programmer has placed this. This is not a default constructor. Are you able to understand the difference, everyone? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Default constructor, both may look similar, but the constructor, when it is placed by compiler, that is called as default. Okay, this is called as no parameterized constructor. Major difference. Okay, don't get any confusion. And the second, and one more thing is, for example, if I have for example, if I have a class like public class. Okay, now I am going to have a I am not placing any constructor. I have just have a public class here. Right, if I give this code to the compiler is going to do what? It will do what? It will do some changes, right? Guys, are you finding any network latency? I mean, are you getting knocked out of the meeting room just like that, or any network issues there from your side? Is my network clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay then. So public class A, okay, the compiler will do only one thing here. The thing that it is going to do is, it is going to extend the class to the object class. Extends object. The second thing is, it is going to add a default constructor. Okay, now the question comes. After adding default constructor, it is going to add the super keyword as well. What about the access modifier? It is going to be same as the class access public here, so it is going to be public here. Right? If it is not public, it is going to be default. Okay, whenever the default constructor is getting added, it will consider the access modifier of the class level. Making sense? This is one of the observations that you have to make. Okay, and the next thing is, okay, when I have class A, okay, I can also place a constructor like the private constructor also I can take. It is not necessarily that the constructor names, the access modifier of the constructor should be same as the access modifier of the class. It is not necessary. You can also take a private constructor. You can also take a protected constructor. No issues. Only when you are not placing any constructor, then the compiler will ensure that the access modifier of the class is used for the constructor as well. Only when you are not placing it. Okay, but if you are placing any constructor wantedly or deliberately, right, as per the requirement, the compiler will not interfere. Right? You can also use the private constructor. Okay, scope can be private as well. No issues with the compiler. Only when you do not place it, it should be same as it will ensure that the access modifier is same as the class name. If not, no issues. Right? So we'll understand what is this private constructor in the constructor chain, what is a protected constructor. This will be discussed in detail. So today our understanding is limited to what? We have understood a lot of things today. We understood about what is default constructor in detail. Okay? And also we have understood about what is the super keyword. Okay? This is the keyword that is going to be placed by the compiler. This should always be the first statement inside the constructor. Okay, if you are doing any kind of violation, you will get this error, right? And what is the overloaded constructor? You can have any number of constructor with different values, and to as per the requirements. The real-time application development this is going to make a lot of sense. And after this, we have understood about the constructor chaining. Right, and tomorrow we will understand about there is another keyword called this keyword. Okay, there is a lot of misconception between the super and super keyword. A lot of tricky questions are there between these two. right? And also we will try to understand the difference between this as well as both look same, but they are entirely different. So by this we can conclude the constructor topic by tomorrow. I can guarantee you that. Any doubts in the